Folks, each and every week we talk about social and environmental justice with a sprinkling of fiscal conservatism thrown on. And here we have a fine example of that. Larry Bain, chef, entrepreneur, and visionary in the green industry. Good to have you, Larry.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's jump right in. Now, you were originally with the Toronto Mayor's office, and I think that was probably the late 70s, early 80s, but then you got involved in the restaurant industry. What led you to that?
It was an accident, more or less. The mayor had decided to move on to federal politics, and I had very little interest in moving to Ottawa. I didn't have ice skates. Couldn't imagine how I could get around. And I realized with my background with the mayor's office, I had also worked with a couple of consulting firms. The world was my oyster. I opened up the newspaper. There was an ad for a wine steward.
Okay.
I like wine.
Who doesn't?
I thought, well, this will be a nice little break so I can gather my thoughts and think of what's really next for my career. But once I started working in the food business, I realized that it oddly brought together all of the disparate interests I had in community development. Food comes from the earth and is our closest link to it. And all of the work I had done in the mayor's office was about building a healthy community that had a close relationship to a healthy rural environment.
Okay.
And this was all done on a very theoretical level, and a very serious planning, land usage, and land management level. But food spoke to me so directly about those issues, and I realized that all the people whose eyes glazed over when I started talking about planning and regional distribution of assets and resources, when you talk to them about an apple, they can hear you. And it was a new way of communicating thoughts that had been bubbling up inside me for years.
So you went to work in New York with 5 different chefs, as I think I understand.
You know, a lot of chefs are fly-by-nights. You go down there and get the best job you can and keep a very careful eye on what you want to learn next. And so I started off in a restaurant where they let me peel vegetables, and then I found a restaurant that let me actually cook vegetables. And I
up in the world.
Kept my eye open for learning opportunities, and was very lucky to work with Larry Forgione, who was the first chef on the East Coast who was exploring the bountiful resources of the region and cooking with regional ingredients using his French technique. At that time, everybody in New York was using French technique and French ingredients.
Oh, yes.
There was a lot of shipping involved and a lot of trips to the airport.
Oh, yeah.
But Larry was making trips to the eastern shore of Long Island and to the clamming regions in Connecticut. And so I really started getting interested again in farming and fishing on the edge of an urban environment.
So instead of having a huge carbon footprint, we're talking about social and environmental responsibility, if I might say.
You know, it can be viewed on so many levels. There's the carbon footprint, there's so many other aspects of local eating, but in essence, it's very much a function of city dwellers that they become so divorced from nature. And it's so glaring among children in particular who grow up in urban areas, and their only access to rural is on television, and that's terribly distorted. There's a gentleman who wrote a book and described this nature deficit disorder as being one of the real challenges that urban youth face. And so again, the easiest way to connect people to the countryside is through the food that's produced there.
That certainly makes sense, and as I understand it, Tracy Desjardins asked you to come over and help her restaurant become socially responsible. I guess in thinking about it, to me, that's just sort of a natural fit. A restaurant should be socially responsible.
You're absolutely right. Restaurateurs are nurturing people. You know, you have to be very careful. I always advise friends of mine who are contemplating any significant business decision or even divorce, don't ever ask a chef to negotiate on your behalf, because all they want to do is say yes. All they want to do is give and give and give some more. And it's interesting how a lot of these chefs, in their hearts, were giving, nurturing people, but then found themselves in an industry that traditionally, really since its inception in France in the 1700s post-revolution, has been a very exploitive industry, where you're exploiting your labor. Restaurants are incredibly hierarchical for the most part.
Yeah.
And there's also this notion of exploiting the vendors and suppliers, getting the best price and getting the quality you want at the expense of the people providing it and preparing it and serving it. And Tracy had succeeded tremendously at creating a wonderful restaurant, a spectacular customer experience, delicious food, but she was ready to move beyond a better chicken.
Yeah.
She was ready to bring back into her restaurant the heart and soul that drove her to the restaurant business to begin with. And I didn't have values that were different. I wasn't asked to tell Tracy what to do, but just help her find out how to do it in a way that made economic sense.
So it is possible to be financially profitable, or as we like to say, fiscally sustainable, and socially responsible.
For me, the two cannot be separated, particularly in an era of dwindling resources, where if we're really serious when we talk about impending disasters, that we're living in the 11th hour, or the 11th hour and 57th minute, if all of our resources are disappearing and drying up, then the only way you can stay in business beyond next year is to take a sustainable approach and to think of yourself as not only taking advantage of the wonderful flavors and incredible aromas and tremendously healthy aspects of sustainable food, but partnering so that the farmer is in business for 20 years, which means you can be in business. Because, as Tracy will admit, you know, she knows how to cook, but she really knows how to shop. And if that food isn't there, no farms, no food, no farmers, no farms. And so it needs to be a partnership from seed to plate.
And really then on environmentally responsible, when I thought of the restaurant business and I noticed your focus on social responsibility, to me, environmentally responsible, I could see restaurants having a huge impact in that area.
I think the social justice aspect was something that I have been dragging along with me since you know, my wild teens. But restaurants, and in particular moving out to California and seeing the incredible web of connections that restaurants have to all elements of the environment, and realizing again, restaurants in fact are the single highest user per square foot of energy than any other retail business. Nothing else comes close.
Oh, that makes sense.
And so restaurants, between their ovens and their ventilation system and the fancy lighting that you get, the cleaning products, cleaning that grease, keeping the white linen white, restaurants have the potential to be real cancers on the surface of the planet. But if you change the way you do business, and if you set different priorities, restaurants have the opportunity to be tremendous enhancers of the quality of the environment by looking at environmentally friendly cleaning, by shopping locally and with farmers who are stewards to their land, by turning off lights. You know, chefs love to keep all the burners going. You know, I would walk into these kitchens and, you know, there's nobody in the dining room, there's no pans on the stove, but the flames are high because they love fire. It's a very dangerous environment. And so restaurants, by doing business a little differently, and really in the way that their chefs intended when they, nobody wakes up saying, today I'm going to destroy the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, some people do, and they just resign from their service in the White House. But aside from Karl Rove, nobody wakes up wanting to destroy the planet. They wake up wanting to do good. And restaurants offer people the opportunity to do good and to do well.
And they could be tremendous centers of influence and change setters, if I may say.
Absolutely. This is a crazy town for chefs. No other place in the world will interview a chef, on political issues or social issues. But California, and in particular San Francisco, see chefs as real gatekeepers. And they are people that can change the way people think about not just eating, but living in the world and being really connected to that very delicate web that we've created.
We'll be right back. More with Larry Bain after this.